Well, here we are again at another installment of Kentico Market Insights. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you're a returning attendee, welcome back. If this is the first time you're participating in Market Insights, we're certainly happy to have you, and we're looking forward to seeing you again at future sessions. Market Insights is a webinar series that's intended to be strictly educational and informational. Again, this webinar series is intended to deliver high quality content and information to marketers and digital strategists who are just looking to learn and stay on top of the latest trends in this rapidly changing industry. And if you've been following Market Insights, then you know that we host these presentations every 2 weeks or every couple of weeks on a schedule of every other Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. The expertise we're bringing to you is a collection of information from the over 1,000 solution partners that Kentico has worldwide, and they retain an extensive amount of information, best practices, and thought leadership in digital marketing as well as online engagement strategies. And these solution partners are typically web, interactive marketing agencies that cater to all types of industries and verticals, as well as project types. And this series works to bring their experience to you so that you can gain the perspective and best practice knowledge that they've obtained through hundreds and even thousands of web projects and e-commerce and online marketing engagements through a consistent series of webinars. So as you can see, we've got some additional great topics on the horizons that may also be of interest to you, including analytics in experiential design coming up on August 9th at 2 o'clock by Rise Interactive. And as we typically do, we will send reminders of these upcoming webinar topics to you so that you can keep current of the latest trends in the industry and obviously keep up to date on the cutting edge online engagement strategies. Now, today's topic is titled UX Tips, 9 Tactics to Better Build Your Website. And our host presenter today is Kyle Chandler from the Heilman Group. And Kyle is the Director of Marketing Services. He's out there helping clients implement holistic digital marketing strategies that deliver successful business results. With a deep background in web development and marketing research and analysis, Kyle also assists in the technical implementation of search engine marketing, display placements, email marketing, paid social, and marketing automation programs. Now, the Heilman Group is one of the leading full-service digital marketing agencies based in Cleveland, Ohio. And they simply deliver results from initial inspiration to measurable outcomes, and they help set and accomplish a client's digital marketing goals. Their know-how and thought leadership isn't simply built on the latest buzzwords. They actively engage with clients to, finesse objectives into inventive and effective strategies, and then they implement those strategies using best right technology. And it's through this unique integrated approach that they develop customized client strategies that are shaped by their expertise in marketing, creativity, and technology. Additionally, they are recognized as a Kentico Gold Solution Partner, which is an indication of the level of experience and knowledge that they have on the Kentico platform, with the number of websites, the number of employed Kentico certified developers, and the Kentico Gold Partner level is the highest classification of partnership that Kentico recognizes. Now, that said, the Heilman Group is also frequently recognized and commended for the quality of their work with numerous industry awards as well as Kentico recognitions for things like Site of the Month distinctions. Now, as referenced in the previous slide, they've completed a number of projects on the Kentico platform and have gained an incredible amount of experience and knowledge along the way. And their client list is certainly long and impressive. It includes companies like Marks, Cleveland Clinic, Myers Industries, Americart, Purell, Cooper Tire, just to name a few. And with many of these projects, again, winning awards or various industry recognitions. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to remind you to please submit your questions throughout the presentation, as we'll try to actually address each and every question at the end of the webinar today, and we'll try to cover all of those before we wrap up the session. So finally, I'd like to formally introduce and welcome Kyle Chandler, the Director of Marketing Services at Heilman Group, who's going to provide us some education and insight on UX tips, 9 tactics to better build your website. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Eric. I also want to introduce Joe Ix, who's a user experience designer here at Heilman Group. Been on board here for a little over 3 years and has been doing great work and a lot of experience. So welcome, Joe, as well.
Great, thanks, Kyle.
For a real quick overview of what we plan to go through today. So we have to hit our introductions. What we're going to do for the first few sections is we wanted to put a primer down. As we know, there's going to be people from beginner to advanced attending the webinar today. So we want to touch on what is UX and more importantly, what it isn't. Go through the differences between UX and UI, as well as what the recommended process is. So a quick primer. From there, hopping into those 9 best practices. That's where we'll spend most of our time today. And then obviously key takeaways. We have an extra little bonus slide in here that we called the UX Designer's Toolbox. So give you guys a quick sneak peek at what we use, as well as fielding any questions. So if you have any questions, make sure to put it in the chat box, and then we'll address those all at the end. So with that, we can dive into what is UX and what it isn't.
Great. So to start off, I want to make sure we were all on the same page. So I wanted to go over what UX is and isn't. Inside and outside the industry, there's a little confusion to what user experience or UX really is and what it actually details. So starting off with a couple of definitions here. The Nielsen-Norman Group defines as encompassing all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. Usability.gov defines it as focusing on having a deep understanding of users, what they need, what they value, their abilities, and also their limitation. And then International Organization for Standardization defines it as persons' perceptions and responses resulting from the use and/or anticipated use of a product, system, or service. So if you notice, each one of those definitions are a little bit different in what they say that UX is. But really what comes down to is what the user needs to use a product and how it shapes their views of that product. So really it's not just the user interface, which a lot of people think it is just the user interface. So I always refer to the illustration of the differences between the ketchup bottles. So a while back, the ketchup bottle was redesigned. Originally it was designed so the bottle was made out of glass and the cap was on top. So this made it more difficult to get the ketchup out. Sometimes you'd have to even use a butter knife to get it out. Then it was redesigned to have the cap on the bottom and it was made out of plastic. This design was a little more funky, but it fit in your hand better and the ketchup naturally went to the bottom where the cap was. So essentially this is UX. It allows the user to get to the product easier, and it's concerned with the overall functionality, while the UI is concerned more with the visual appeal. So really the UI, or user interface, is one of the many aspects of UX. From a website standpoint, user experience is information architecture, content strategy, interaction design, usability, user research, and again, that user interface. Then saying what the user interface entails, it's the actual visual design and the visual prototype. So a little bit different. Really, you need both to have a good UX. Obviously, with the user interface being part of UX. So as this Venn diagram shows, there are a lot of different things that are rolled into UX. A lot of things to take into consideration when forming a user's experience. So most companies are different with how they classify UX within their employees. Some focus on look and feel, some focus on the functionality sections, and then some focus on business care. But however a company divides its resources, there must be a collaboration between the teams. UX encompasses a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different ideals whenever you are creating something for that user. So next I want to go over kind of the recommended process. Again, from a website standpoint, what is recommended whenever you are shaping a user's experience? So there are a couple things that you can do. You can do things like stakeholder interviews. So stakeholder interviews get feedback directly from the users of the site on its current state. So these help inform future efforts like personas, sitemaps, and wireframes. There's user testing, which allows you to test users on a specific set of criteria to influence the direction of the new site or app. So user testing really allows you to talk to the actual users of the site and have a conversation with them and see what problems they're having with the site and what problems they aren't having with the site. Then there are personas. So the personas, you create a fictional character that demonstrates the characteristics of the target users. So it's really who you want to aim for when you are creating a website or an app. It's who you want to keep in mind whenever you are designing and whenever you are laying out different kinds of functionalities for the website. There is user audits or UX audits. So UX audits, it really takes a look at the current site and goes over and reviews the current site from a UX standpoint. See what is going on that is wrong with the site and what is going on that's correct with the site, and try to remedy that, or gives the idea of problems to remedy in the future. And then there's the competitive analysis, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's analysis of the competitors to see where the new site or the current site can really get better with that future version, where it can really improve within the different things that the other competitors do as well. So really, those are kind of the research aspects. What comes out of those are things like the sitemap and the wireframes. So the sitemap is a list of pages displayed in a tree structure used to determine content, hierarchy, location of information, and navigation throughout the site. And then the wireframes are something people are always confused on. So what the wireframes are a blueprint of a future website. So what these are used for is used to show the functionality that will go on within the website, on a page. They are also typically used for planning the site structure to see what the user will actually see and where the content will be laid out within that site as well. So now that we talked about that, we are going to go into best practices, or the 9 tips. So starting out with number 1, understand the business goals and objectives. So one of the main goals of UX is to make the complex simple. If you have a very hard to navigate site, the user could leave, and in turn, that can impact your business. So the user only comes to the site for seconds, and in those seconds, they really choose if they want to stay or leave. And you don't really want to give them any reason to leave the site earlier than they should. So going to some statistics about how UX and business objectives kind of roll into one. So how can UX help with the site overall? So a good UX design can raise a website's conversion rate between 200 and 400%. Companies with highly effective UX have increased their revenue by 37%, and top 10 UX leaders in America outperform the S&P with close to triple the returns. So that's a really impactful number there. So if you have a really well done UX, it can really translate to your bottom line. So if you think of companies like Apple and Google who have a really good grasp on user experience, They're some of the top companies in the world. And then another one is 90% of users reported stopping using an app due to poor performance, according to the attention span study. So again, this goes to not really giving your user a reason to leave your site. Give them a reason to stay on it. If you have poor performance or things like slow load time, which we'll touch in the future of this presentation, it can really impact them and really have them be very early within their journey. So you have to know your audience before you can create a site for them. You have to know who you're creating that site for, and that's where the personas, which we talked about earlier, come into play. Knowing who those people are, who those users are using your site. To have a great UX, you really need to know and talk to those users as well.
So with that brings us into our best practice number 2. So we've all heard the mantra, content is king, specifically in marketing, but this carries through very strongly also with user experience. Some of the things we'll want to look at here is content or design, what comes first when you're building that new experience, what makes content more effective, talking about the content and context of your keywords in marketing, as well as touching on navigation hierarchy, how it aligns to your content as well as the user experience.
So when talking about content and design, I would think of the chicken and the egg. You know, which one comes first? Content thinks design is first, and design thinks content is first. But really, there's no right or wrong way to go about this. What is key for content and design is collaboration, making sure that the people writing the content and the people doing the design are talking and communicating throughout that process. The number one goal of a website, above all else, is to relay its content to the user in a meaningful and impactful way, so that they'll remember that content and they'll really come away from the site with the knowledge that the content gave them. So how do you make that content more effective? How do you help the user to read that content and give them an easier way to read that content and interact with it? So there's a quote from the Nielsen-Norman Group that says, people rarely read web pages word by word. Instead, they scan the page, pick out individual words and sentences. And this is very true these days, especially reading web pages from things like phone or tablet. Having that smaller viewport makes you focus on little bits and pieces instead of the overall paragraph, if it is text. So how do you tailor towards that type of reading? You can do a number of things. So listed here, you can use small digestible chunks of content, use concise text with a scannable layout. So one sentence describing the information or leading into the information, and then below it being bullet points or numbered lists. You can separate content with headers and different levels of headers. So using things like H2s and H3s throughout text, and making sure that there's established hierarchy throughout there. You can call out specific pieces of text in a paragraph using bold or italicized type, something that you really want the user to focus on and make sure that they read and come away with. And then there's always something to remember, which is content isn't only text. You can use high-quality imagery, icons, and infographics like on the right of this slide to really relay your content in a more engaging manner.
The next area is aligning your content along with some marketing measurements as well. So Joe touched on some great tools you can use earlier in the presentation, things like stakeholder interviews where you can work through and understand the business objectives and the core background of what the business use case is for your content that ties into that user experience. Another great tool that you can use really in tandem with that is leveraging search trends. So people like Google and Bing and a handful of other large providers provide this data to you in a very easy and readily accessible way. So one of the great use cases that I always like to reference here was a past client where they sold industrial barcode scanners to, it was B2B, so sold them to people like the Postal Service or anyone where they needed to scan a mass amount of products at a long overtime. So we worked through that stakeholder interview, understood their need, and as we started looking at the search trends, we saw this very unique kind of anomaly here where barcode scanners was average monthly search was around 300,000, while barcode reader was 18,000. So currently on their site, they mentioned barcode reader across the entire site, and we had then the conversation around, well, what's the difference? Is there in the industry, are these two different things? Is there anything unique about the terms that make the products different? And the end result was no, there's no difference. It's just really selection or preference of which one you went with. So by taking that core business rules we got from the stakeholder interviews, overlaying search trends, we're able to go ahead and select a term that had way more search. It gives them way more visibility, and it aligns with what the end users are actually using out there rather than just what you use internally at your company. So you're always making sure you're gathering multiple data sources will make your experience far better for your end users. So the next section we have here is navigation. So once again, an area where we have overlap of user experience and search engines. So one of the goals here, or one of the common trends that's always been in user experience is making sure nothing's ever more than 3 clicks away. So we don't want people to have to dive really deep and get lost in website navigations and forget where they're at to find core information. So we want it always to be readily accessible, easy to find. This correlates also over to search engines. So search engines, as they crawl websites, they actually have a crawl limit per page. They can only crawl the first 100 links of every page. So if you have a lot of navigational links or a lot of pages, it's very easy for search engines to only get so far onto your site and then stop crawling. So you can get certain indexation issues. You have authority issues. So a page's authority is passed down link by link. So the more links you have, the more that link authority is going to spread out. So by following that user experience best practice with navigation of always keeping things 3 clicks away, it gives you a way greater search engine results ranking as well. So with that, you're really able to really get a win-win situation there. So we always think of it as that section landing page. So define your core categories. From there, you can do your subcategories, and then from there, you're into your detail pages. So having that hierarchy is really a win-win situation from a search engine or SEO perspective as well as your user experience. With that takes us into best practice number 3. So mobile friendliness is no longer an option, it's a requirement. So we'll touch on again how this impacts search and marketing, as well as looking at the differences of mobile and desktop. So from a search perspective, so mobile, we probably all heard of mobile getting out. It happened in 2015, so just about 2 years ago, where Google went ahead and rolled out one of their last of their large algorithm changes. Recently, they've been smaller tweaks or finesses, but one of the last of their large algorithm changes where they began to penalize on their mobile searches. So if you're on your mobile device doing a search on Google, if a website was non-mobile optimized or it wasn't responsibly coded, Google would go ahead and penalize your search results. So if you did not have a mobile optimized site, you weren't showing up when people were searching on their mobile phone. So that is a huge impact, and it actually continues to make a larger and larger impact as search and really users change their behavior. So the last stat we have here was, I believe this was in 2016, the top sites measured mobile device traffic officially broke above desktop traffic. So 56% of people are actually visiting websites, searching, driving their traffic on their mobile device over their desktops. So when you think about that, the impact is certainly greater now if you don't have your website optimized. Google's doing this because they want the best experience for their users when they click through. If they're on their device, they want that experience to carry through and have a continuous experience. So definitely a highly impactful piece to keep in mind.
So then the question is, how do you get that desktop site to show up on mobile properly? So what you do is you make it responsive. If you see from the image below there, Some solutions or some companies' solutions to make it responsive is to just throw the desktop site directly on mobile and make it a little more difficult for the user to actually use it on the mobile. But that's the incorrect way. What you want to do is you really want to make it responsive. So you want to have it so that the website, whenever it hits that mobile viewport, really reorganizes and makes it a lot easier for the user to use. You can't have the same exact experience that you have on desktop within the mobile device. There's certain things that just don't work within mobile. So things like hovering on things, there really is no mouse over or anything like that. So you can't really hover on mobile. So you need to think about that whenever you do convert it over to that responsive site. So next we're going to talk about logo and brand identity. So really you want the user to know who you are. You want them to remember you whenever they leave your site. So remembering you goes back to some of that content issues that we were talking about earlier, but also talks about your actual logo and the placement of your logo. So when a user comes to your website, they need to know whose website they're looking at. And if you look at this quote right here, users are 89% more likely to remember logos shown in the top left position rather than logos placed on the right. So really, it is becoming standard to have that logo in that top left position. And with numbers like that, with 89%, that's a really big number that there's really no reason to place it anywhere else except for that top left position. It makes the user remember you a lot more and a lot easier. It also gives them a way to, whenever they click on that logo, go back to that home page so they can kind of start over from the top of the site as well. So with that logo being that top left, we talk about consistency. It's consistent throughout websites. It's kind of a standard. So speak a little bit more about consistency and other things that you should really look out for when you are creating that new site. A quote from Anton Nikolov, consistent design is intuitive design. So what is meant by that is when users use your website or app, they follow a set of patterns established throughout the site. So for example, that image to the left there, when a user is filling out a progression of forms and the next button is on that right side, you really want to keep it on that right side throughout that progression of forms. So there'd be that next button on that right and a cancel button on the left. But if on one of the forms you switched it up and had the cancel button on the right and the next button on the left, it really gives the user an opportunity to mess up and accidentally hit that cancel button. So that could aggravate the user and really have them leave the site whenever they're in an important journey, an important part of their journey. So visual consistency can be established through things like style guides and brand guidelines that can be created while your new site is being developed as well. So then this image here kind of shows you a little example of how to make it a little different. So whenever you are seeing an image and then a button right next to that image, you want to make sure that the user knows that if that button does something different than they're used to, you want to make sure they know that. So doing things like having the button being round or changing up the image style that goes along with it really kind of signifies the user and tells the user that this button does a different action than the previous buttons you're used to. So going on to tip number 6, we start to talk about cleanliness, or what is also referred to as white space. So what white space is it gives the user somewhere to focus. It gives space around different content and makes sure that content is highlighted within the user's mind. By allowing things like text or buttons and allowing the white space around those text and buttons, it's more likely to give the user an easier time interacting with those elements. If you allow some white space between different things like images as well, the images start to appear as distinct images. If the images are too close, they can appear as one. So then going to this example right here that the WWF has actually created, this shows right here that the focus is on the middle of the page. It's focused on that content within the middle of the page and the buttons that are also there. But this also shows you that when somebody says white space, it doesn't necessarily mean the space has to be white. Here they're using a darker color and allowing the text to be white, allowing the user to focus within that text there. There's not really added images or anything like that around the text and the buttons. Then this example with Dropbox, they're using the white space to kind of highlight that sign up button. So that sign up button is a really bold blue color. And they're allowing the white space around that form and that sign up button and giving the user a place to kind of focus. So they can look at that image, they can look at the text to the left of it, but really what stands out is that form and is that button. And then there's always Apple, who does a great job of this. Really, you know exactly what you're focusing on. You're focusing on that big, bold image that's right there, the headline that's above it, and then the Apple Watch logo that's right above that. You know exactly what they're displaying, what they're showing here. There aren't other products kind of cluttering that space. It's showing the Apple Watch and it's showing other kinds of Apple Watches right there. So it gives the user really that place to focus and the product to look at. So another quote here is, white space has been proven to increase comprehension by up to 20%. And really, again, that's what you're trying to have the user leave your site with. They want to make sure they understand and remember the knowledge that you have passed on to them and the content that they have read.
Awesome. So that brings us to our best practice number 7. So don't hope end users take action. Give them easy call to actions. So we want to talk about intent, clarity, as well as the locations as well. So when we hop into it, so throughout your website, you want to make sure you have clear and concise call to actions that drive your end users through. So the example we have here, we've all seen a marketing funnel. This is really the same idea, just turned on its side and aligning kind of key content pieces or call to actions that are relevant across here. So as a marketer, of course, my goal is I want someone to really do everything that's down in the desire stage. So I want someone to be calling for our sales team, requesting a consultation, requesting a proposal, a quote, or some kind of contact. So we want someone to engage with us. But we know in people's customers' journey, in their unique buyer journey or customer journey, they're really early. If they're just doing their research, they're not going to make that phone call. So if I only allow that to be the only call to action across my website, I'm going to have pretty poor performance, pretty poor engagement, as each person is going to be working through their own unique journey. So with that, we're going to keep in mind the different levels of call to actions you should have so you can hit people no matter where they're at in their journey. So earlier on in the awareness stage, things like thought leadership, blog posts, articles, might be awards, recognitions, or PR pieces. And we want to align call to actions kind of along that funnel. So if you think about it, if someone is perhaps visiting a pricing page on your website, knowing that they're looking at pricing, they're much further down that buyer's journey. So perhaps on that pricing page, it'd be more relevant to put a phone call to action, or maybe request a consultation call to action, as opposed to if maybe they're just on your blog at a very high level, perhaps instead you're calling out a case study for them to engage in. So giving them a piece of content that's one step further, trying to bring them further down that user journey or that buyer's journey to get them through. So always keep in mind where they're at and try and give call to actions across that journey. Some examples of that, we have a few screenshots on here. The first one being our Hyman Group website. You can see the small orange bar below. So this is an example of an awareness type of call to action. So this is on our homepage, highest level page on our site, and it's just calling to action one of our content pieces. So when people come here, they're able to see that. If it's relevant, they can click and engage. It's not asking too much of the end user to engage in the article. Inversely, we have an example from on the top left-hand side from VBrick, which is one of our customers. They're a software as a service company, so they sell video streaming and video software online. And this is an example of up at the top of their main navigation on every page they have a get a demo call to action. So it's relevant kind of across the entire user journey. But when you're on their solutions pages, you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom until you get the call to action of talk to an expert. And that was done with intent, with the idea of if someone's at the top before they read, they're less likely to want to talk to someone until they make it all the way through. And if they do make it all the way through, they're far more engaged and have moved further down that funnel because they've engaged with all this content. At that point, they have a much higher likelihood to want to talk to someone. So you always want to think about the where you're placing your call to actions, what they look like, and really that idea of where they're at in their journey. With that brings us into best practice number 8. So attention spans are shrinking, and so should your page load times. So we really want to touch on that idea from the user experience, but once again, looking at the search engine ranking signals as well. So with that, Google has publicly announced that site speed and in turn your page speed is officially part of the ranking algorithm. So how quickly your page loads will determine how high or how much you rank for your website. We know it's lower in the ranking factors, but it's certainly one of them. Google doesn't publicly notify of all their ranking factors. So the fact that they make this a high level point to acknowledge it definitely hits home. So what that means is any pages that are slower, they're going to be less likely to be crawled, less likely to be indexed in search engines. So focusing on that page load speed will certainly help not only how often you rank, how many people can make it to your site, but also conversions. If your site takes more than a couple seconds to load, people are going to leave right away. It's going to affect your conversion rate and your overall engagement rate.
So then tip number 9. So your website has launched. What now? So a lot of people go through their website and pretty much leave it up how it is for those next 2 to 4 years. Then once that 2 to 4 year mark hits, they start a new website. So really throughout that lifetime of that website, content doesn't get touched, maybe a new blog post gets written, but nothing really changes throughout there. So really you want to have some tracking within your website. So if we look at the image, so don't build a product like this. You only discover if you have succeeded at the end. So really what this is showing is starting out with just a tire and building all the way up to a car. Instead, start with something basic and gather feedback as you get more complex. So starting with kind of that minimum viable product and growing from there. So different ways to kind of put a website out into the wild is starting with that minimum viable product and putting some tracking on there. Using things like heat maps, user videos, or even Google Analytics to really help that influence how to improve your website and tell you what to change on your website. This also ensures that you're still going in the right direction, that you still have the same users coming back to your site throughout the lifetime of that website, and to make sure that there's no new opportunities, or to tell you that there are new opportunities out there that you can kind of go after. So one of the things like heat maps really shows you how the user is interacting with your content, how the users are interacting with your website. And that can give you a lot of insight. So it can tell you if you should change the placement of a button, change the actual headline within a content area. Or it can also tell you that the content that you have on there isn't being utilized at all, which may tell you want to change and offer it up in a different way.
Another important part is to making sure that you have post-launch tracking and analytics set up as well. So you launch a new website and you wonder, well, how well did it do? So some great things to look at from a marketing perspective is leveraging tools like Google Analytics. So it's a free tool. Most people actually are already leveraging it. But making sure that you have analytics set up so you can see the pre and post-launch, what was the impact post-launch, as well as some search engine ranking tools. So there's a lot out there. things like Moz, SERPs, Raven tools. There's many more to list after that. But the idea of, once again, having an understanding of what terms are important for you, understand where you rank, and then post-launch where you rank. One of the things to keep in mind, too, is when you launch, there's always going to be a range of anywhere from 30 to 60 days where your ranks are going to drop. You're going to lose some organic traffic, and then it's natural. So even if you do everything right with the redirect strategy, you'll still have a slight dip, but it will come back. It's essentially Google re-indexing your new site, but it's a natural thing. So keeping an eye on that is definitely impactful. Thinking of things to do to augment your traffic when you do when you go live. So even if you have an abbreviated paid campaign that's running, or having certain press releases hitting around that time to augment it is always a good way to make sure you're carrying through traffic during a new site launch. So with that, those were our 9 tips. We'll go ahead and dive into our key takeaways. So our first one is knowing your users paramount to your success. So we talked a lot about stakeholder interviews, bringing in additional research points, whether it's search engine trends or other comparative analysis. So knowing who they are will make you definitely succeed.
Content is key for any UX effort. So again, you want to make sure you're serving up the correct content, and you're serving up in a way that the users can actually take something away from that content and read it very easily.
Mobile friendliness is needed for any site to reach its full potential. The almighty Google forced their way, and we're really forced to follow suit.
The logo in the upper left corner of a website is standard. So really, if it's standard, why kind of deviate away from that? Make sure that the user knows who you guys are with that logo in the upper left corner, and then they will see that logo and remember, hey, I can get back to the homepage with this logo as well.
Our next one, consistency makes a website that much easier to use.
Then white space allows the user to focus on the content. So creating a little bit of white space around content, making sure that there isn't competing imagery or competing content with it, allowing the user to kind of focus on that, and again, take that away from their experience with the website.
The next one, there must be a goal to go along with your call to action. So keep in mind where they're at in that buyer's journey, that customer's journey, what's relevant to them, and making sure that you have content that works throughout that journey to have success.
Don't let a slow website be the reasons your users leave. So you never really want to give the users any reason, and a slow website is definitely one of the top ones for them leaving a site.
Then our last one, once a website is launched, the work isn't done. So we always like to think and kind of live by the mantra of a website's never completed, it simply is published. The idea is to constantly improve, refresh it. One of Google's ranking factors is website freshness. So the longer you let your website stagnate, the less effective you are in search engines. Sweet. And then the last piece we had on here, and then we'll hop over to questions, was we want to go ahead and give you guys a quick snapshot of the UX Designer's Toolbox. So I wanted to give you guys a quick snapshot of the tools we use and the tools we find effective, from site mapping to user testing, wireframing, and prototyping. So definitely some great ones to leverage. We'll make sure that you guys get a copy of this deck and a recording of this so you guys can go ahead and dive in and research more. But definitely a great jumping off point for anyone looking to get in and do more on the UX side of the house. So with that, we'll hop into questions. We'll throw it back over to Eric, and then yeah, if there's any questions, we'd love to answer them.
That's great. Thanks, guys. So actually, there are a number of questions. I know while looking at the key takeaways that you referenced, one of the things that I always talk with my clients about from the digital marketing side and and kind of that engagement side is, once it's launched, it's an iterative process. It's continuing to develop, mature, enhance, and your audience also changes over time. So keeping up with the demands, keeping up with what the expectations are by your customers is always important. So I thought that was a very important one to reiterate, is that, your work's not done once you've launched everything. So let me see here. First question that came in. Actually, here. It came in actually fairly early. How do you guys build out a sitemap, and what recommendations do you have for organizations who are just starting this process?
Sure. So really building a sitemap, there's a couple of people that need to be involved with that. There needs to be the client. There needs to be somebody on the content side, and then somebody on that more so design side. So you really want to make sure that you're building out the sitemap to what the client wants to relay to their users. You want to look at the content that the client has or the content that will be created for the site and really kind of divide that up into categories. So you can always use your users to test how that sitemap is built through things like card sorting and user surveys. But really you want to keep in mind the people that are using your site. And you want to kind of get feedback from the client from that perspective and from the future users from that perspective as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And actually, this question came in from one of the first points that you made. I like the example you illustrated with the for user experience with the ketchup bottle. Because I can't tell you how many times that frustrated me in the old model with putting the knife down the neck of the ketchup bottle to get out the get the goods out. But this question is, I guess, bringing it back to website development. But what's your UX process for websites?
Sure. So really, again, it's pretty similar to what we kind of proposed here. We do start with those stakeholder interviews, making sure we talk to the current users of the site and making sure we get as much feedback and information from them as possible. Then we do kind of create some personas around those stakeholder interviews, so around the people that we talk to, and also talking to the client if there are any new users that they want to kind of aim the website towards. We make sure we form the personas around that. So then we do that competitive analysis to see what the competitors are doing and how we can use that to kind of make our site better. And to make sure that we have the whole market covered within our site. Then we start to jump into that user testing and really kind of showing the future users or the current users of the old site what we are doing and make sure we're heading down the right path with the information we got from those stakeholder interviews and that we put together with the personas. So with all that combined effort, that's when we do kind of jump to that sitemap, which we just talked about, and jump into those wireframes to make sure we have the correct functionality for those users that we are creating the site for, making sure it's not anything too crazy with the functionality that we are proposing or too simple of functionality either.
Okay. Now, you made mention, your response was focused a lot around the functionality of the site. In one of the key takeaways, you commented also that content is key for any UX effort. How do you balance the kind of the prioritization of functionality versus content?
Sure. So we always go back to the users. We always make sure we're putting the correct functionality in there for the users, but we also want to display the content in an engaging way. Make sure that the users really actually read it and understand the content as well. So you can utilize things like different animations and things like that to bring content in, but you want to make sure that that content is still focused on the user and still focused toward that user. Making sure that, say, if the site was developed for somebody in the older age range, that there's not things like those animations that is talked about, bringing that content in when there's really no purpose for that.
Good. Thank you for the clarification. So let me see here. And we'll go with this question. How do you decide what types of functionality to add to the website? Again, for example, animation. Is animation something that is more distracting, or is it something that evidence finds that it draws the attention to the things that you want?
Sure. So sometimes it definitely can be more distracting, but if it's well done and if it's focused on those users, it can really enhance their experience with the whole site. So we actually just did a site where there was a lot of content, a lot of information that we had to display within the page, but this was a more technological savvy audience that we were developing it for. So we made the content a little bit more interactive because we felt like they knew that what they'd be doing to really access that content. So focusing on that user, keeping them in mind throughout that whole process, and really keeping in mind the content that is going to be used with that functionality. Make sure it makes sense. And then if you really need to, test the users on it before you can launch the site. Create a little development site and really send it out to some users that might be using a site in the future and have them play around with it. Let them give you their feedback and see what they really come up with.
Okay, and actually, I think we've got time for one more question. Actually, it's kind of related, but I'll throw it out there. What's Heilman's group's feeling on rotating banners? Is it the blinking fonts from the 90s made new again?
So in a way it is. So really the statistics with rotating banners these days are after that second banner, nobody really looks at it. So starting out with the first banner, everybody sees that one, of course. The second banner goes down by 50%. After that, again, the drop-off is very significant. So really we're trying to move away from rotating banners and trying to not have rotating banners on sites anymore, because that also affects the page load time, especially with a lot bigger screens that we're using. Really with the rotating banners, there's normally imagery that goes along with them. So we're trying to avoid loading, say, 10 very large images right when you get to a site. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to have one focus for the user to look at. So within that hero area, have that large image still on there, but have that be the only one that's that size and that's weight for a site. Allow the user to focus on that image and that text that goes along with it, and if there's a button that goes along with it as well. Again, it gives the user kind of that place to focus. It gives them the actual content that they need. And if there are reasons for maybe introducing other rotating banners or something like that, instead take that content, put it in the actual page, or put on some interior page of the site. That also kind of goes back to planning for that site and really thinking about how the site is handled and how it handles future updates like that, like new information.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So I would love to continue with some questions, but I think we're running low on time. But that said, we did record this session, so we will be providing the recording out online as we typically do for Market Insights on the Kentico's YouTube channel. And I'm sure the Heilman Group will also be following up with those who attended to provide any additional information or even copies of the slide deck. So I want to thank everybody for joining us and certainly taking the time to listen to some of the expertise that Heilman Group can provide. And mostly I'd like to thank the Heilman Group for taking the time to present this information. It was very valuable and appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, guys.